What's the difference between Starship V3, V2, and V1? Let's find out in today's episode of AlphaTech. Starship is currently the largest rocket ever built by humankind, including the first stage, named Super Heavy, standing over 120 meters tall. SpaceX has conducted 3 orbital test flights so far, 2 of which took place in 2023, and the last one was in March of this year and was very successful. However, Elon's company is now exploring something even bigger, Starship V2 and V3, presented on the presentation slide. What will be the difference between these versions and the current prototype? First of all, Starship V2 is slightly taller than the current prototype, with the spacecraft's height increased by an additional 2 meters and the booster's height increased by 1.3 meters. The increased payload capacity and thrust during liftoff enable it to carry more than 100 tons. The new version of Super Heavy is expected to provide approximately 15% more thrust than the booster used in the March test. In fact, Starship 2 will be the first version of SpaceX's rocket to operate fully and allow it to deliver cargo into space. Elon declared that SpaceX has launched more cargo into space than missions conducted by other companies or nations. When Starship can fly regularly, the success rate increases to 99%. However, when it comes to Starship V3, some upgrades really come into play. It is significantly taller spacecraft, resembling a clearly elongated version, with the thrust expected to be improved compared to Starship V1 and V2. Starship V3 could increase from 7,000 tons of thrust of V1 to over 8,000 tons of thrust for V2, and eventually over 10,000 tons of thrust for V3, as Elon shared during the presentation. This results in the payload capacity of Starship V3 doubling that of Starship V2, exceeding to 100 tons and surpassing all current vehicles. Starship V3 will stand at 150 meters tall, instead of 124.4 meters of Starship V2 and 121.3 meters of Starship V1, and may even be taller than the current launch tower at Boca Chica. At that size, the 2 stages of Starship V3 are almost identical. The fins also look slightly larger and may be fixed in place. With these improvements, Starship V3 will accommodate for 1,500 tons of fuel in the booster and 1,300 tons in the ship, larger than the 3,650 tons in the booster and 1,500 tons in Starship V2. Starship V3 will feature 6 engines and 3 additional vacuum engines, while Starship V2 and V1 will maintain 3 sea-level engines and 3 vacuum engines. Another feature we notice is the hot staging section of Starship V2 and V3, differing from Starship V1, instead of the original style vent hole design. Now the new version of Starship has an interface similar to the Soviet N1 style on the interstage adapter. This has sparked much debate about the entrance of the increased gravitational force on Starship's capabilities when subjected to very high pressures during flight. However, these are just predictions, and we have to wait and see what SpaceX does next. Additionally, the graphic images of the various versions of Starship shown provide an answer to past speculation when Elon Musk hinted about the new version of Starship. At that time, we speculated that the initial lengthening of Starship would be part of the rumored V3 lineup currently in the design phase, and Starship V2 wouldn't be produced and might get skipped. However, this is no longer accurate, as Elon and SpaceX are definitely going to manufacture Starship V2 later this year and launch it by 2025. This could lead us to speculate that Starship V3 could potentially be manufactured in early 2025 and ready to go in 2026. Of course, this is not just speculation, as we recently saw the first hardware components of the new version of Starship at the construction site, proving that SpaceX is actively working on Starship V2. In addition to the impressive capabilities of the new version of Starship, Elon Musk also mentioned another very important aspect that Starship will undoubtedly achieve in the future: maximizing cost reduction. Musk stated that the future Starship V3 will cost less to launch than SpaceX's original rocket, the Falcon 1, a small rocket with a price tag of around $10 million due to its reusability. He estimated that the cost per launch of Starship could decrease to $2 to $3 million. These are unimaginable numbers, he said. Nobody ever thought this was possible, but we're not breaking any physics to achieve this. Well, This goes beyond our imagination. For example, if a future Starship costs $2 million to build and $2 million for fuel and operations, then even in an expended mode, the payload cost will be $15 per kilogram. Now, considering a $3 million Starship capable of flying thousands of times, the cost would primarily depend on fuel expenses for the flight and minimal overhead. By implementing systems for synthesizing liquid oxygen on site, fuel costs would be substantially reduced. For example, with an estimated $500,000 per orbital flight for fuel and 250 tons of reusable payload, the cost would range from $2 to $4 per kilogram. Similarly, for transcontinental flights with fuel costs estimated at around $125 per flight and the same payload capacity, the cost would be around $50 to $100 per kilogram. That's the difference between a fully reusable rocket with low-cost propellant, which actually costs less. This provides an advantage that no other rocket in the world can match. Since the 1950s, the cost of traditional space programs has made it inaccessible for most countries, and although SpaceX is not the only private company providing launch services, it has become one of the most important today. Now, humans have more opportunities to access space thanks to Starship, and this is not just a leap that can be achieved only by billionaires, but it's an opportunity for all of us. Starship has an immediate impact after completing orbital testing and obtaining safety certifications. The first steps will be launching satellites and supply missions to the International Space Station, followed by sending humans beyond Earth to the Moon and even to Mars as early as 2026. A lunar flight is planned for Starship under a contract with NASA. The reusability and cost savings of Starship align with the agency's goals of establishing a broader human presence on the Moon, making it a stepping stone for the future. Additionally, Starship itself will become the first outpost on these distant planets, and government planners won't have to worry too much about emergencies, as it will serve as a home on the Moon or Mars, in addition to interplanetary ambitions. Starship also revolutionizes transportation here on Earth, with its enormous payload capacity and rapid speed. The new version of Starship will expand transportation opportunities from one point to another, reducing transit times between distant points. Of course, with affordable prices and availability of Starship for everyone, whether government or private organizations, cheaper payloads into space will lead to more accessible orbital tourism. The first commercial orbital stations will create more opportunities for hosting tourists, and tourists themselves will be able to fly on Starship. Contracts for this have already been signed, for example, the Polaris program. Jarek Isaacman, billionaire founder of the payment company Shift4, has purchased up to 3 additional flights from SpaceX. The first mission, named Polaris Dawn, is scheduled to launch in 2024 with a 4-person crew under Isaacman's leadership using the Falcon 9 rocket and Crew Dragon spacecraft. Polaris Dawn marks the beginning of up to 3 planned missions, with the last one being the first crewed spaceflight of the SpaceX Starship rocket. Each new rocket system brings space a little closer to us, and the time when space travel will be as accessible as air travel is not far off. Isn't all of this amazing? But in reality, as Starship continues to evolve, it will have even more advantages than we think. These will be crucial steps for Starship to approach these important goals. It will not only strengthen SpaceX's dominance, but also be of immense benefit to NASA and the American aerospace industry. It can be said that the changes with Starship V3 truly break all boundaries, not just the size limit of the rocket, but it will be the limit of exploration that people beyond the Moon or Mars aspire to. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Despite the impressive achievements of Starship, let's not forget that the journey to space exploration requires not only technological revolutions, but also a deep understanding of environmental protection and sustainable development. As we strive for new horizons, it is important to remember the preservation of our planet and ensuring equal access to the benefits of space exploration for everyone on Earth. Thank you for joining us today. And let's continue to explore the great mysteries of space together. Until we meet again.